Welcome, everybody. I'm Hugh Hewitt, president of the Nixon Foundation, and we are pleased to bring back to the library via Skype Dana Perino of Fox fame. Dana, how are you?
I'm great, and I'm grateful for your time and for the Nixon Library's time and for everybody joining via Skype. It is COVID times, but we're almost through this. We'll be back together before you know it.
I'm so glad that we're talking with Dana today and not another author because of her book, Everything Will Be Okay. On page 90, it says, good leaders are calm when mistakes are made. And so we just had a whole series of technical snafus, which are common to everyone who's been living in the virtual world. Dana, you're calm, cool, and collected as I am, and it's just part of the deal, right?
That's right. Everything will be okay. And you know Leo Terrell, of course, he lives out there in California. He described me not too long ago as powerfully calm and energetically calm. And he said, how could I be more like you? And I thought, wow, Leo, have you watched videos of yourself? Because I find him so energetic and so powerful, but calm, he is not.
Well, I really do appreciate this book, Dana. Everything Will Be Okay is your second book since leaving the White House. And 5 years ago, you wrote your first bestseller. This has now reached #1 on Amazon. It's on the New York Times bestseller list. You hit the sweet spot with women, I believe, 25 to 35. Is that the sweet spot? Although I'm sending it to my sons as well as my daughter and daughter-in-law. Tell people about the genesis of Everything Will Be Okay.
Thank you so much. So in that first book, and the good news is, and I remember coming to the Nixon Library and just being so overwhelmed by the people that were there and the support and the encouragement that I felt. And, you know, today would have been Pat Nixon's 109th birthday. And I think about all the people that have come through, and especially all the women that have come through government, and then, you know, you don't stay in government forever, you move on. And the support network is so incredibly important to everybody. And so for myself, the way that I decided to fulfill an obligation to give back, I feel there is one. Right after I became White House press secretary, I was just inundated with requests for coffees and meetings and mentoring advice. So I started to try to do as much as I could. It got to be to the extent that I couldn't have coffee with everyone. So in that first book, and the good news is, I had one chapter that was specifically geared for mentoring, all my advice in one place. But over the years, Hugh, what I heard from people is like that was the part of the book that kept landing with people, and it kept being given out for graduations and things. And I thought, that's actually just a sliver of what I would like to advise people on. Because what I did in this book, Everything Will Be Okay, was to take the advice about how to improve your workday or how to improve your chances of getting a better job or a raise or a promotion, to then how do you become a manager and a leader? How do you step up? How do you become the one that everybody wants to turn to in a crisis? And then the third leg of the stool is, how do you do that with work-life balance and serenity? And we're now in our 1-year anniversary of a 2-week lockdown to slow the spread. The statistics that are coming out about who is going back to work and who isn't, they're kind of troubling to me, but I also recognize that, you know, some of these decisions are going to be made where companies are not going to have people come back to the office. So what I tried to do here was also provide some advice for how you can continue to climb the ladder and network and be a part of your organization, even if the pandemic's, you know, working from home is going to be basically living at work.
Dana, at the end of the book, I'm going to go to the end first and then go back to the middle and end up at the beginning. At the end of the book, President Bush has called you. You're at a new job at a PR firm, and he says, how are you doing? And you say, oh, fine, boss, fine. And he hears the real Dana, and he pushes you. I think this is worth the price of the book itself. Tell people about that conversation.
Yeah, so I don't know if people realize this about President Bush, and I think maybe most presidents are like this, but he loved career counseling, still does. So he would always keep in touch with his people and find out, how are you doing? What's your next step? How are you going to grow? And how can I help? So I had joined this big PR firm. I knew, Hugh, when I was signing the contract that it was not for me, but I figured I needed a place to land. while I tried to figure out what else I was going to do. Well, sure enough, it was just not for me. One of the things was there were a lot of Bill Clinton people that worked there. And while I liked them very much personally, we did not mesh in terms of our work cultures. For example, they were late. They used a lot of curse words. They would yell at each other. And when I would sort of be flummoxed by all the yelling, I remember one of them said, "What, you guys didn't yell at each other at the White House?" I'm like, "No, did not." That was something that George Bush would have allowed. Anyway, I was trying to make it through. And 43 says, "What's wrong?" So I said, "Well, I signed this deal and I'm working at this PR firm and I don't like it." He says, "Well, why don't you resign? Why don't you just start your own business?" And I said, "Well, sir, here are 13 reasons why I shouldn't start my own business." And I basically went through a few of them, and he said, "Yeah, none of that is persuasive to me." And he asked me this one question that I think was the most important question, and I continue to ask it of myself. And when I mentor, I ask young women this. He said, "What is the worst thing that could happen? If you start your own business, like, truly, Dana, what's the worst thing that could happen?" And when I teased it out, I mean, the truth was, if I started my own business and it wasn't successful, I would go back to working at a PR firm. And he said, "That doesn't sound like it's very bad to me. And I am not persuaded that you can't do it." And it was a really good push. I did start my own business. I ended up keeping that PR firm as a client. And my business was growing. And I was at that crossroads of, do I grow the business or do I need to cut back a little bit? And I was at the airport, Dulles Airport, waiting for my bags. And I got a call from Fox News asking if I'd be willing to come up and do this temporary show called The Five.
That is an amazing story. I love the fact that President Bush got you to the answer that you would have gotten to eventually, but he did it by asking questions. One of the pieces of advice that you put in for young people of every age at the second job or the third job is to have friends with whom you can have that kind of conversation. I believe your ideal set of friends in your imaginary world includes a cultural expert, a historian, a comedian, a lawyer. I'm glad you included a lawyer. I'm a lawyer. Everyone needs a lawyer in their life. Do you still have that network besides your husband and your friends at the Five who are colleagues? They're not really friends. They're professional friends.
So much so. I call it your personal board of advisors, and I absolutely love it. I have some friends that work in the tech sector. They're very helpful, and biotech, actually. That's always super helpful. Dentists, people who actually, one of my best friends that I learned the most from is a stay-at-home mom. And I also recently met a new woman, new to me. Her name is Lydia Finette, and she wrote a book called The Most Powerful Woman in the Room Is You. I love her story, and she's an auctioneer at Christie's. What do I know about auctioneering? But I'm fascinated by it. I'd love to learn more. Yes, I feel like I've been so blessed, Hugh, because I had these friends. You know what it's like, and people watching here might know, but in a White House, your relationships are forged in fire. And I'm still such good friends with so many people that I worked with in the Bush White House. And that actually let me have friendships with people from the Obama administration, the Trump administration, and now the Biden administration. Not a ton, of course, but enough where if I need somebody or I have a question, I can pick up the phone. And then I come to New York and I thought, wow, Peter and I will be so lonely here. And that has not been the case. My life is just filled with these ripples of friends. So I feel that one of the things I write about in the book is you should just keep making friends. I don't like the word networking per se, because that sounds like you're just reaching out to somebody in order to get something from them. But if you continue to build friendships, it will come back to help you.
I want to go to the very small stuff and then telegraph out. First of all, be on time. We are not on time today. And I apologize to the 100 people who are watching for our technical difficulties. I get the vibe that the Bush White House is very much like the Nixon Library. We hate being late. If you're 5 minutes early, you're late. The Nixon Foundation in my life and on radio and in television. But where did you had that before you ended up going to be Tony Snow's deputy, right? And you spend a lot of time emphasizing to people, be on time. It's a bit ironic that I'm starting here, but I can't stress enough how important that is to me, to you, to President Bush, to all the people that you talk to in your book.
It's interesting because working in television suits me fine, right? Because you can't be 5 minutes late. This was a technical difficulty. This was not anybody's fault. This was just technology. Well, I grew up on a ranch, and so early to bed, early to rise was very much the way that we lived. My grandfather had that old adage: if you're not early, you're late. But then, you go to the Bush White House, Bush 43, and let's say policy time was at 10 a.m. You better be ready at 9:40 because they'll start calling around like the president's ready. Just this past weekend, I was in Dallas. I had a chance to see the president after my book event, and I interviewed him for something that's coming up the end of April here. And I told my team, they said, we're going to be ready to go at 9 a.m. I said, everybody better be ready at 8:30. And they're like, really? I'm like, oh, yeah. Well, Hugh, guess what happened? 8:26. The president's ready to go. I'm like, yeah, nothing's changed. And it's kind of comforting.
It's a wonderful bit of advice because you don't dump on millennials. So I'm going to observe something about millennials. You're very kind to millennials. They have an elastic definition of start. They have an elastic definition of time and measurement of time. You try and walk them back from that in a very gentle way. And I don't think you can repeat it enough. It's actually impolite to people and take advantage of their time when you are late. And I know we can't be late in broadcast. If I'm not on there at 6:06, the show goes on and nobody here. If you're not on the 5 or your own show, there's blank tape there. And so driving it home again and again and again, I salute you for that.
Well, and also because you will not get the job or the promotion. If you're chronically late at work, you have to do something. You have to do something about that because you will not be top of mind to be the person that they think that, they really want to make sure that you're going to be the one that takes on the new client. Nobody will think of you if you're not punctual.
Let's go to work. I want to start with the small tips on page 100 to 102, Dana, because I found them so useful to everyone. Tidy up the inbox. Always use a clear subject line on your email. Never reply in anger. Kill the thread quickly. Don't loop in unnecessary people. And this is the gold prize. Text or email your boss sparingly. Take them in any order you want, but I want to come back to that last one.
It's so funny. I feel like when I hear all these things, I have a lot of advice. I have a lot of opinions about how people conduct themselves around the office. And I hope I don't sound like too much of a scold when I'm telling people what to do. I'm just saying, if you follow this prescription, you are more likely to be the person that gets promoted or hired or all that. Okay, I'm going to do one before we do the last one. And that is use a different subject line on an email thread. So I find that sometimes young people, let's say we're emailing about the conference that's happening on Thursday. So we're talking about the conference, and then there's a long thread about that. Then all of a sudden, your assistant or a different employee puts in an email that you need to answer that has nothing to do with the conference, and you miss it. And then you lose the thread. That's actually the saying. You've lost the thread. And so if you need something from your boss that has something to do with a different subject, you always do a different subject line because that's how people communicate. Way back when, we used to communicate by actual hard copy letters. There were even courses that you could take called business writing. And that wasn't just about presentations. That was also about letters. Well, what are business letters today? Those are emails. So you have to be smart, thoughtful, and you have to write those in a very good way and keep them very organized so then your boss can keep them organized as well.
And when you write your boss, this is so important. We're going to talk about managing up in a moment. You and I talked about it on the radio the other day. I value from my team at the foundation, the team in radio, brevity and to the point, because it's also a Hugh Hewitt rule that nobody reads the whole email. They only read the first paragraph of the email. So if you're going to actually get something done, don't go windy on me. Go right to the point. And you are very similar, I think. You want to make sure young people stay focused on the value that their boss puts on the boss's time.
Well, this kind of goes to managing up, right? So where did I learn this? One of the ways is because when I would brief President Bush or the chief of staff, Josh Bolten, who I have to say might have been even tougher to manage up than the president, because he demanded excellence. And think about the president of the United States. He has very limited time to deal with all of the issues. So if you get some of that precious time and you have to brief them, it has to be something like, sir, I need your attention for two things. One thing I just need to tell you, the other thing I need your opinion on. Okay? Number one, here's what it is. Number two, I need to know what you want me to say about this. And you have to signal that, like the number one and number two. It doesn't have to be, well, here's 20 things I've been thinking about, and I'm really like interested in maybe like getting your point. Like, no, don't do that. You have to figure out how to like be smart with your time. Think about this. Can you brief your boss from their desk to the elevator and get what you need? That should be your goal.
And when you manage up, you also encourage young people to take consideration into when they approach the boss, when they approach about what subject, and how does the boss like to be approached. This is, again, a novel concept, but it's so integral for people to succeed, to know how it is that if Dana Perino's staff at the 5 or at Fox knows when to approach you about a big issue, a little issue, or no issue at all. You've laid out, I'm sure you've signaled them 1,000 times, correct?
Well, yes, absolutely. So, for example, in New York, when you're carrying like all your bags and stuff, and you're just getting to the office and you're trying to like get settled, that is not the time to ask 3 complicated questions about the schedule for that day, or to say like, oh, hey, the big boss called and you're in trouble or something. Like, give it a second. I'll tell you one example at the White House. I had an assistant who around 10 a.m., sometimes he would ask me, what do you want for lunch? And so it's only 10 in the morning. I'm not hungry. And he said, well, here's the thing. You're going to be in meetings between now and 12:30, and you only have until 1 o'clock. And if you don't tell me what you want, then I'm not going to be able to get it. And then you're going to be starving and you're going to bite my head off. So I need you to decide what you're having for lunch right now. That's managing up.
And managing up it's not a condescending concept. It's actually about how you manage your career forward. Let's talk a little bit about people who want to move up quickly, Dana. It's a scourge to be ambitious, but it's a necessary thing to want to be ambitious and to chart a path that goes forward. You put something in, everything will be okay, that I want people to hear from you, which is that you have to master the job you have in order to expect to get another job. You want to expand on that? And you and Tony Snow are the perfect example of that.
So yes, I think that young people are very ambitious, and their starter job where you need 2 to 3 years experience, sometimes I feel like 6 months experience should be enough. And they also tend to think that they're smarter than the boss. Well, I'm here to tell you, like, you're not smarter than the boss. They are the boss for a reason, and you're going to be working your entire life. I think even for me, I was in quite a bit of a hurry, and I wanted to know, well, what's next? What's next? In the book, what you find out is that every time I have a career advancement, it's not because I planned it. It's because I was prepared and ready, and that somebody saw that I was ready. And you are not going to be ready if you're still making mistakes in your regular job. You might be bored with your job. Okay, well, that's a different thing. But do you know how to do it perfectly? Can you do it perfectly well every single day? Have you asked for additional assignments? Do you show up at work and do you look like you want a new job? I talk a lot about in the book about posture, and even I just have to sit up straight myself. You announce yourself before you ever say a word, and that is how you carry yourself. So just imagine that you want to get a job, or you want to be the one that gets to go to the news conference or to brief the board. If you are hunched over and if you're like this and you're competing against somebody who is standing up straight, studies show, Hugh, that the person who has better posture is going to get that job or that opportunity.
Let's focus on that for a second. One of the things you write in the book, bosses are like parents. They have eyes in the back of their head. And there are 20 people who work at the Nixon Foundation. The radio team is probably half that. So about 30 people that I'm involved in on a daily basis that I have to keep an eye on. That's 30 different sets of eyes. But I know when I walk into a room who's getting along with who else. I know who is productive. I know who's engaging. And I'm sure you do too at Fox News. Why is it important for young people, as you counsel them, to be aware that the boss is aware of everything all the time?
Well, one thing I talk about is there are times when you start a new job, for example, and you might fall in with the wrong crowd and you don't know it for a few months. And then you realize, oh, wait, these people are going nowhere fast. And you have to find a way to extricate yourself from that situation. The bosses know. They know who the troublemakers are and who the gossipers are and who works extra hard or who's being dumped on. Now, they might not know everything, but they know enough to have a sense because people are just intuitive. It might be a little different, Hugh, in the Zoom era, right? Because this interpersonal communication is harder. And I do recommend, if it is possible, if your office building or your company is accepting people to come back to the office after the pandemic, and you are in line to come back, try to go back. I think it's going to be important to get back in the office. So, you want to be able to be seen. A lot of things that happen at the workplace, Hugh, you know this, it's after the meeting when everybody's filing out and the idea generation is going as, hey, let's catch up on that. I have an idea. And that's harder to do. I know that some companies feel that productivity is just fine with everyone working from home, but I have a feeling that people are going to realize it's going to still be important to have interpersonal communication. And besides, what about a competitive advantage? If you're in the workplace and your boss and your coworkers aren't, maybe you'll be the one that is top of mind for the next advancement.
So that's good mentoring. I have two women in my life who are in your demo. My daughter is 35, and my daughter-in-law who's 30. And we were having a conversation one night I was about to interview Matthew McConaughey. Oh, you've got to talk to him about how to lose a guy in 10 days, which I had never seen, being a dad. And so I watched it, and I watched it not long ago because I prepared for the Green Lights interview with Matthew. And they talk about this trio of women at work. And I don't know if you're familiar with the movie at all, but that it's not the way work really is. That every bad habit in the world was in a movie. And I wonder, do you think movies somehow glamorize work and send the wrong messages to people who observe them about what it really is about working?
Yeah, I just actually had this experience, not with that movie, but I was in Texas for a book event, and somebody was going to come and do my hair for me. I had hired this person to come do my hair. And before I arrived, she asked my assistant if it was like working for the Devil Wears Prada. And my assistant is very young. She's like, what? What are you talking about? She goes, like she seems nice on TV, but she's really a monster. And so, yeah, I think maybe a little bit. Or, here's the other thing. Women have come a long way. Now, I'm not saying we don't have more to do. We do. But if you look at across the board, especially in government, women are doing very well, excelling in a lot of different areas. There are more women now. The majority of women are the main breadwinners in the family. And so there's a lot of things that they need in order to do all of that and help raise the children and have a life as well. But they're really in the driver's seat. One of the things that really concerns me, Hugh, and one of the reasons I wrote the book, is that I find young women today are just so racked with anxiety and worries. And it's preventing them from realizing this great opportunity that they have. They are not victims in the workplace. They are in the driver's seat. When I say everything will be okay, I totally believe that, but it's not passive. That doesn't mean you don't have to work hard and make good decisions and be disciplined. It takes work to get to serenity, but there are ways that you can do it, that you can have all of these things. And work is a wonderful part of my life, but it is not my life.
Yeah, you write in Everything Will Be Okay. And please, people, take this to heart and tell everyone in your life this. You are completely in charge of your own social media. To repeat, Dana Perino, I think it's on page 90. You are completely in charge of your own social media. I think that people, especially the younger they get, are slipshod in remembering that they're in control and that what they write, they will own. And even people, we have seen it with near attendance defeat. Social media is going to kill you in the future if you don't manage it in the present well.
So I start off the book talking about integrity and how it's your most important asset. You have to protect it at all costs. And then throughout the book, I talk about social media. And I find that when I'm talking to young people, part of it they realize is that it's taking over their lives. It's not adding to their lives, it's actually subtracting. They're comparing themselves to other people all day. And I write in there that comparison is the thief of joy. I have found, Hugh, that if you step away from social media or cut way back, I am promising you it will not hurt your career. In fact, it could actually enhance your career. I remember interviewing a young man about a year ago, and I asked myself, like, can we find out something more about him before he arrives? What's his interest? What does he do? He has no social media accounts, never has. He got the job because he, on the merits, could do the work, and he's been a wonderful employee. But I thought that was so wise and so difficult to do, right? Because fear of missing out. Now, social media can be really wonderful for many things. I love it for to keep track of news. Very helpful for me to promote things. It's very good. But if you find that it is hurting you in any way, it is okay to step away. It won't hurt your career.
It can hurt your career to not step away. I had a conversation yesterday with a senior bond salesman from a firm in LA, about my age. So he's getting ready to retire and hang it up and go off in sailboats and things like that. Their firm prepares a Facebook dossier based upon every applicant's Facebook profile and everything they've ever posted on Facebook before that candidate appears in the office. Whether or not that is acknowledged, that is what smart employers do. So you're building an internet resume every minute. Now, you were building a resume at the White House with Tony Snow when Tony was your boss. What is it about what you did there that led the president to offer you Tony's job when he had to step down?
You know, one of the things I admired so much about Tony is that he was not a hog. He wasn't a boss hog. I don't know if I actually wrote that, but that's what I meant. But he wasn't a boss hog. So that when you are in a position like Tony Snow as the press secretary, that means that you always have a seat at the table. Well, he would often send me in his place. Like, why don't you go do that? Why don't you brief the president on this? He preferred for me to brief the president on press conferences before the president was doing one because I was pretty good at it. Tony was very good at the podium himself. I loved being behind the scenes. And then because I was able to have that FaceTime with President Bush, when it came time to transition from Tony to somebody new, I was very much top of mind for the president. So I recommend to people, do not be a boss hog. Make sure that the people, I call them a deputy or the vice president or the vice manager, whatever it might be, let them every once in a while step up. And that doesn't mean it's going to diminish you. In fact, I'll give you an example. In 2008, I was about to have my 10-year wedding anniversary, and I had told the president I was going to Utah to go hiking for a week, and then the financial crisis happened. So about 3 days before we were supposed to leave, I said to Peter, I think we should cancel, postpone, we'll go after the White House is over. And at the White House one day, after a meeting, we're walking out, and I said to the president, by the way, remember I said that I was going to be gone next week, but I'm not. I'm going to be here. And he said, why? Do you not have somebody in your office that can cover for you when you're out? Have you not prepared somebody for this moment in case you're not here? And I realized, of course, I had many people that could do it. Tony Fratto was the principal deputy. But what the president wanted was for me to be a good manager and for me to teach them to be better managers. And he made me go on that trip, and I did.
There are so many lessons in there. I want to now turn to one that comes from Hamilton first before it showed up in Everything Will Be Okay. Talk less, listen more. It was Burr's constant refrain to Hamilton in the show. Talk less, listen more. You say the same thing, but in a completely different context. Not because it's scheming, but because you want to hear from other people and genuinely hear. And I like the physicality of your suggestion, which I'm demonstrating. Why did you recommend put your hand over your face?
So I actually learned this from a friend of mine. He's a senior person in the intelligence world, and he said that over the years, he found that younger analysts would not be willing to speak up in a meeting if he were there and actively probing and asking questions at first. And he said he found that if he held his hand over his face like this, it prevented him from interrupting. And I thought that's such a great exercise because it does two things. It makes me focus and it makes me prevent myself from interrupting. I find young people have a hard time with this. Interrupting, they got a lot to say. They want to say it quick. They were like right in there. And I actually said to someone the other day, a young person, I said, I don't think you realize, but you have so much to say. You're so ambitious. Like you interrupted this principal before he was able to finish, and they were mortified. Oh, we have a little bit of an obligation to help other people. In this book, some of these things might seem like, well, who doesn't know that you need to dress for the job you want, not for the job you have? Well, frankly, if nobody has told you that, and you've spent a lot of time on your Instagram and your YouTube feed and you're watching Bravo, no one's told you. And I think that was really good. And plus, do you remember how Charles Krauthammer could sit and listen to every other panelist, and then he could just deliver one line that was so good? I really think it was because he was such a good, active listener that he could be so persuasive in just utilizing a few words.
It's a skill set that takes a long time to develop, how to listen actively. You gave a great set of questions to be asking all the time. But before I go to the conversation thing, now I want to switch over to managers. What you just said is what a manager should tell a young mentee or employee in private, not in front of other people, and always with some encouragement attached. For example, we're going to kill off up talking right now because I hate up talking as much as you do, and we talked about it on the radio the other day. But when you're going to tell someone not to up talk, tell us how you'll walk through that with someone on the Fox team. If someone is up talking, how are you going to engage them to alert to that, Dana?
So this happened. So this one young woman, she came to work for me. She was super bright, but she would talk like this, especially if she was around people that she was like embarrassed to be around, and it just crushed her. It crushed her. And I watched it a little bit. She's so bright. She wrote so well. She's fabulous on social media. So I gently took her aside one day and I said, I'm so excited for your future. It is bright. And there's one thing I think that if you just tweak something a little bit, you will not believe how much farther you're going to go. She said, what? And I said, so I don't even know if you realize that you tend to sound like this. And I did an example. And she was like, I talk like that? Yes. Hugh, they don't know they're doing it. All their friends talk like that. They think it's cute. They think it sounds hip and whatever they think. I also think that it's a way to avoid taking responsibility for anything or actually having an opinion, because if everything you say ends in a question, then you don't have to own the opinion. Oh, I was just asking questions. Do you know she stopped doing that immediately?
I also love getting rid of getting rid of me, and getting rid of verbal tics. But you don't know you have a verbal tic until your boss tells you. But you stress, do that privately, not to the embarrassment and chagrin of the employee or the colleague in a public setting. Kindness goes a long way in the workplace.
Absolutely. I look for it everywhere. More grace and more mercy. And I think that, look, if there's an employee that you don't really care about, that you're like, oh, this Yahoo, he's not going to make it, you might not pull him aside. But you should. But let's say that there's somebody that you think has a lot of promise, but you can just tell the boss is never going to want to hear that. Like, I can't send this person in to brief the president. Are you kidding me? And I'm supposed to teach them? I'm the manager. So yes, I do think taking them aside. And if you couch it in the way of, I'm so excited about your future. It is so bright. Here's one thing I think that you could do to help improve. Don't give them 20 things to help improve, even though they might need 20. Start with 1 or 2, and up talking should be the first.
Okay, I want to land the plane, Dana. You've done 17 interviews today. This is 18. That, by the way, is a testament to hard work, because if you write a book and nobody reads it, it's not really worth doing. So book tours are a nightmare, and I salute you for doing it. The anecdote I will remember, I talked to you about it on the radio show already. Long after a book is put back on the shelf and I've read it, I remember a few things about it, is the boss who doesn't know about the weekend phone call because the staffer put it on their calendar and then neglected to remind them that day. Who's at fault there, Dana?
So it's very interesting. So a young woman, all the young women come see me. So this one young woman came to see me. She said, my friend is having a really hard time. Her boss is so mad at her. Like, what happened? So they tell me. I'm like, okay. And the young woman came to see me. I said, she can come see me. Let's talk about it. It was a very busy time, election season. There was a conference call at 4 p.m. on a Saturday. She put it on his calendar with a reminder, okay, that would come up. And then she went to have her great weekend. In fact, she admitted to me that she slept through that time. She said, well, he should have known. And I thought, okay. Oh, and she said, and And I deserve some time off too. Absolutely. Everybody deserves some time off, but it's election season. You work at Fox News. You need to be at least willing to maybe call your boss at 3:45 to say, just making sure that you know that phone call is in 15 minutes, right? That's all it would have taken. And he wouldn't have missed the phone call, and he wouldn't have been mad at her, and she wouldn't have been upset and wanting to leave the company, and all of these things. And I said, when you, and also then they weren't speaking to each other for a few days.
Yeah.
And I said, well, if you want to get this right, I think what you could do is to go in and just to say, I never want that to happen to you or to me again. So let's figure out the best way to make sure that you always have what you need on your schedule. And I said, if you break the ice and go in and say something like that, it'll be better. Everything's fine now, everything's good. But it was just one of those things where I thought, wow, nobody is talking to each other in a way that could be productive in this situation.
This week, Dana, I taught a class with Ashley Parker of the Washington Post and Ron Brownstein of the Atlantic for Stanford, for Lanhee Chen and a couple of professors out there. And Ashley told the story of how she went from being Maureen Dowd's research assistant, maybe the worst job in newspapers, she said, to being an ace reporter for the Washington Post. And it came down to a lot of the things that you have and everything will be okay. It came down to saying yes, again and again and again. I will do it. I will go. I will drive to nowhere in the middle of Virginia on the weekend assignment because it's important to me. Now, I don't know. There's a line in Chariots of Fire. You can't put in what God left out. But you can certainly remind people that work at any hour is what distinguishes people.
It really is. And, I think that there's a lot of obsession right now with work-life balance. I think all of us think about it a lot. One of my pieces of advice in the book is that sometimes you have to think about work-life balance, not over just the course of a day, but over the course of your lifetime. There will be times, like when you work in a White House, for example, where you are not going to have a lot of life outside of work. But a couple of things. One, you got to try to find the work that you love. When I'm working 20-hour days during election season, I run on adrenaline. I love it. Now, would I be able to do that for 365 days a year? No. You got to figure out a way to get some time. And if you're a manager, you really also need to make sure that your people are fresh enough. So I remember one time at Christmas season at the White House, everyone seemed so stressed. And like you said, the boss, I walked in, I'm like, what's wrong? Finally, one of them explained to me that they were all stressed out because no one had been able to leave to buy Christmas presents for anybody. And it was like December 22nd. So I said, okay, well, what can we do? And we worked out a grid where everybody could have at least, I think, like a whole afternoon or a morning off so that they can go and do what they needed to do. And you just have to be cognizant of that, and figure out the work-life balance. And that might mean you answer emails on a Saturday morning. I clean up my email inbox on a Saturday, and then I do all of my sort of weekend reading, which is the articles that I wanted to read that had nothing to do with that particular show that day, but that I thought would be smart for me to read. I read those on the weekend because it's good for my job and it sets me apart. And if you want to be a person that has a competitive advantage, you have to put in the work, and then everything will be okay after all that.
You mentioned work-life balance. I love the line. I don't have the particular page right in front of me, where you caution young women that they have a right to have that conversation with their boss about work-family balance, but that bosses can't read minds. And I've told this to 100 different people. I can't read your mind. You can't be mad at me. And you use those words. You can't be mad at your boss if you never told your boss you can't do X, Y, and Z. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, in fact, I interviewed a woman who's the person I said was one of my mentors. She's a stay-at-home mom. She used to run a global talent agency. And she said that, when she had her third child, that at first she was mad because people were calling her at 7 p.m., 7:30 p.m., asking her things that she thought could have waited till the next day. And her children are crying in the background. And she said, finally, I realized that I had to take control of that. And I told everybody in my office, I am unavailable between 6 and 8 p.m. every night, unless it's a dire emergency. And then at 8:15 or so, she'd get back on, answer a couple of emails that she needed to do, and then she could go to bed. So she said, well, sometimes people would call her anyway, forgetting, And let's say she had 3 young boys. There was chaos in the household. And she said that her tactic was just to answer the phone and put it on speakerphone and say, "How can I help you?" And let them hear the chaos, and people will realize your boss will be flexible with you as long as you just talk to them. They have a life too. They understand.
Last lesson and last question. The last lesson is no catastrophe is really a catastrophe. I love the story of the alligator in the 7-Eleven with the tape jaws. Tell people that. You can't actually invent that.
So, you're not supposed to curse on television, and I never had, really, I don't think. And Tom Shalhoub was on air with us that day, and he was showing, no, it was Charlie Hurt. His one more thing on the 5 was this Florida man who had an alligator, and he had taped the mouth shut of this smallish alligator, but still an alligator. And he ran into a convenience store and was shoving the alligator in people's faces, which would have scared me to death. And I'm watching it live, and I said, what an asshole. And well, the room erupted. People were dying laughing. They're like, they couldn't believe that Dana Perino actually said that. I thought I was going to get fired, red all the way up through my temples. And it ended up being actually pretty funny. And Jay Wallace, the president of Fox News, he called me that night and he said, "I just want to let you know that my mom was the first person to reach out to me, asking me not to be mad at you because you didn't know that it was coming and that actually the guy was a total asshole."
I think it was Greg on the set that night.
No, he was out. I think Tom Shalhoub was filling in for him, and then Charlie Hurt was over there. So Greg came back the next day, and believe me, he did not let me forget it.
I get a tear just laughing so hard when I read that because you are not that person, and it wasn't a catastrophe. It's actually a great story. Dana, last question for you: what is ahead for Dana Perino? I mean, when you've done everything, people think ambition runs out, but it doesn't. What's the arc of your career going to look like to you? What do you imagine?
Well, it's funny. Yeah, thank you for asking. There are times when you do something like this where you finish a book tour and you think, well, okay, I'm never doing that again. I will never, ever. You heard it here, right here. I'll never do that again. And then maybe you never know. I'm at this great point in my life where I'm not anxious and worried about what's going to happen next. I do feel like I'll be prepared for whatever that is when it comes. But one thing I do want to do, and I believe it will happen at some point, I just don't know when, is my husband and I very much want to do an extended mission trip to Africa. We have done 1- and 2-week trips over the last 10 years, especially for mercy ships. But there's just something about wanting to go and dig in a little bit deeper and give a little bit more. So I have that on my to-do list and my goal list, but I don't know when that will happen, but I hope it does.
Will you ever go back to Colorado and run for office?
No. I can guarantee that is never happening.
Well, that's what I've said for years, too, so I'll take your no as a no. Dana, it's great. Thank you for your patience with our technical difficulties.
Absolutely.
Congratulations on a book, Everything Will Be Okay, which is a bestseller because it deserves to be. Come back to the library when we reopen, and we'll do this in person, and people will be able to get a signed copy from you there. I appreciate your time today, Dana.
I appreciate your support and the Nixon Library's support, and a happy birthday to the late Pat Nixon. Indeed, I know she was a big champion for women as well.
You were right about that. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time at the Nixon Foundation.
Thanks to you. Thank you.